Alexander, can you just summarize the main arguments of your presentation, please?
In my paper, I have attempted to sketch sort of the parameters of anti-government demonstrations that has taken place in eastern and southern Ukraine in March and early April 2014, following the victory of the Euromaidan, and I have attempted to present an overview of various factors that contributed to the crisis and explain why, in specific historical context, things unfolded in a certain way in the Donbass but didn't do in other places. And I looked at the Russian factor, sort of the crisis of the legitimacy of the local government, sort of specific ethno-political profile of the regions, structures of local authority, law enforcement apparatus, and sort of tried to present a systemic argument about the interactions and contributions to the conflict between different group of domestic and external actors in this particular case.
Do you think that Russia was the main factor of separatism, I would say?
Well, I think there are multiple factors. There is the historical background, and sort of specific conditions were more favorable towards Russian intervention in some regions than they were in others. The Russian strategy, I think, targeted the entire southeastern Ukraine, but in some areas they succeeded to achieve their objective, and in others they haven't, in part because of the assertive position of local elites, such in Dnipropetrovsk, but also mobilization of political Ukrainians in many places that had prevented takeover of regional administration, that had participated in sort of public rallies in support of Ukrainian statehood, and were simply numerically stronger than radical pro-Russian groups on the ground. And it was not the case in Donbass. For a variety of reasons, none of these factors were present there. For one thing, the local elites sort of took an ambivalent issue on the matter, even though they were aware of the Russian active involvement, and had publicly spoken in support of the Ukrainian statehood. And there is evidence that they had tried to do the same things that other people have done elsewhere, that is, supporting pro-Ukrainian rallies in the cities of the Donetsk region specifically, even trying to bribe radical pro-Russian protesters in locations as a way to controlling them and reining the protest scene. But ultimately they had not succeeded, and I think part of the reason they haven't done so is that simply there was not enough organizational strength of pro-Ukrainian groups to balance this movement. Then the other factor was sort of proximity of the border, and it was much easier for Russian radicals from across the border to get in and sort of add an additional sort of force factor to the ultimate events. And of course, indigenous sentiments. There was simply much more fertile ground for radicalism that eventually turned against the Ukrainian state in the Donetsk and Lugansk regions. And that was simply, with the partial exception of Kharkiv and Odessa, was not the case either in Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, or Mykolaiv, which were other regions of the so-called Novorossiya.
You work as a scholar in Ukraine. What about your feelings as a citizen of what happened there?
I had been very ambivalent about the Euromaidan revolution from the very start. For one reason, I understand the motivation and sort of anti-corruption ethos, democratization ethos, and even pro-European ethos. On the other hand, I was aware of sort of economical profile of the regions, and that there's a certain integration, economic integration of parts of Ukraine with Russia, and that was an important factor, I think, for a portion of the population there. And I was worried also about sort of potentially destabilizing factors, including on the issues of ethno-political sort of composition of the population. So my preferred outcome would have been some kind of constitutional settlement and winning out the Yanukovych regime through elections. Of course, that's an ideal scenario, but I don't know whether it was even feasible given all the sort of actors active in the equation, including the Russian government, which would probably pursue the strategy of integration or destabilization even in the outcome of the elections. I think that prevention of the association with the European Union was always very high on the agenda. So it's But the moment the insurgency started, I think I had been alienated by it even to a larger extent than, say, the violent confrontation in the Euromaidan. And for a variety of reasons, but primarily I don't want my region to be part of Novorossiya. Like, if if that's saying anything.
Okay. Thank you much.
All right, thank you.